and welcome to the Cory Doctorow podcast. This is Cory Doctorow, and you're listening to my podcast. So we spent the weekend in Cornwall and Devon, bits of England that I've never actually been to before. My wife has some cousins who set off around the world on a sailboat in 2003 and just got back. So the whole family turned out to wave banners and watch them pull into the harbour in Devon. Cornwall and Devon were very beautiful, and Cornwall afforded many opportunities for terrible puns on the 6.5-hour drive in traffic on the way out. I called my daughter and her cousins the children of the corn. I asked how big the Cornwall was. I upbraided my wife for not liking my corny jokes. I asked if there were a lot of corn stars, and whether they had big niblets. It kind of went downhill from there. So, what else is there to report about my life? Well, there's a fair bit going on. I was at the London Book Fair last week, and there's some video and so on up there. If you've been to my website lately, you'll have seen it. And I have nearly gathered all the documents necessary to submit my application for citizenship here in the UK, or naturalization. I guess technically I'll be a subject, not a citizen, but I will have a European passport, which will be awfully handy. I do have permanent leave to remain here as a consequence of being married to a British person, but citizenship comes with its own advantages in terms of access to consular services and having another passport that I can use to get a visa and so on. And if I'm going to live here for the long term, I'd like to be a citizen. I'd like to be naturalized. It occurs to me that I haven't recently talked about my upcoming books and trips, so I'll run through those very quickly. There's 3 books in the queue right now, in addition to my next novel, Pirate Cinema, that'll be out next spring. Those books are Context, a sequel to Content, a short story or an essay collection from Tachyon Books. That'll be out, I believe, this autumn. There's a book called, there's a graphic novel adaptation of my short story Anda's Game, which you may have heard my wife read in this podcast some years ago, back in 2006. That will be from First Second, and they're going to do a kind of book-length graphic novel adaptation. It'll be the second time it's adapted to comics. And my novella, There's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow, along with 2 essays and an interview, will be collected in one of PM Press's Outspoken Authors chapbooks called The Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow. Got a lot of travel on the schedule for the rest of the year, despite my vow not to travel too much while I'm dealing with the aftermath of hip surgery. Nevertheless, I'm presently finalizing details of trips to Pittsburgh around the 16th of June, and the Open University in Milton Keynes and Oxford are on the 16th of May. Going to be doing public talks at both of those. More details when I have it. I'll also be speaking at the British Library at their science fiction event on the 24th of May, the Science Communications Conference in King's Cross here in London on the 25th of May. I'll be at the How the Light Gets In festival in Hay-on-Wye in Wales, debating Evgeny Morozov and doing a solo presentation on the 30th of May. I'll be in New York for the Personal Democracy Forum around the 5th and 6th of June, and I'll be signing at Books of Wonder in Manhattan on the 9th of June, which is it's the launch of the next Borderlands book, the young adult book that my short story Shannon's Law, that you've heard me read on this podcast, is a part of. I'll be in Vancouver, keynoting at SIGGRAPH on the 8th of August, and I'll be in Reno on the 16th of August for the World Science Fiction Convention, the Brooklyn Book Festival on September the 18th, the Cambridge Cybersecurity Forum on the 29th of September in Cambridge, England. I'll be across Germany November 6th through 10th for the For the Win tour, and then I'm just sorting out details of a trip to New York, Philadelphia, and DC November 12th through 22nd. I'll be at PhilCon, the 75th PhilCon, where I'm the guest of honor. This is the longest-running science fiction convention in the world. I'll also be doing something or other public in New York, and I'm going to try and squeeze in a public event in DC. I'm also hoping to get something together with Wharton and with the Free Library of Philadelphia and Philly. And then I'll be in and around Zurich in their local schools December 5th through 8th. And I'm hoping also to do a local event. If you're associated with a Zurich Hackspace or something like it, please do let me know. I'd be happy to come out and do something public. So that's the upcoming travel. I'm going to read to you today a little from a short story called Knights of the Rainbow Table. Knights of the Rainbow Table was commissioned by Intel, specifically by Brian David Johnson, who's Intel's chief futurist and a very interesting and cool guy. He has this thing called the Tomorrow Project that uses science fiction to inform Intel's engineers about the social implications and product design ideas arising out of the way their technologies might be used, and using science fiction as this teaching tool. It's really cool, and I was very happy to do the story. He gave me free rein to do it. He said anything I'd like to write it about, and they pay quite well, and they put it on the web for everyone to see, and I get to retain the rights. So nothing wrong with that deal. The story's almost done. I'm going to read to you starting from the beginning. If I break off in my reading to correct typos, well, then you'll know that I'm reading to you a first draft, one that has not been read by anyone today, not even me. This is my first time going back and reading it over, so you and I will be the first people to read it. So here we go. Knights of the Rainbow Table. The day that our lawyer told us that the DA had added a federal conspiracy charge to the rap sheet, I immediately flashed on what Abby Hoffman had said when they served papers on him for the Chicago 8 conspiracy trial. Conspiracy? Man, we can't even agree on where to have dinner. I would have said it, but just after Mazowski gave us the bad news, our waitress showed up and asked Sir Tristan what he wanted to order. We, Knights of the Rainbow Table, have always had a problem with restaurants. That problem's name was Sir Tristan Erco, who was intolerant of lactose, processed carbohydrates, salt, vegans, forks with bent tines, and people with poor grammar. Tristan never spoke above a whisper, and he affected a huge mustache that made it impossible for waitresses to read his lips, which made the lengthy negotiations even longer. Normally, the Knights of the Rainbow Table tried to find quiet restaurants, where Sir Tristan could dicker at length without having to whisper directly into the server's ear, but Mazowski had chosen the place, a busy pizza parlor on Telegraph Hill, filled with noisy Berkeley kids. I suppose he thought that it would allow us to converse without being overheard. He was a paranoid old civil rights fixer, but Knights of the Rainbow Table could have taught him volumes about the practical limits of privacy. The three of us stared uncomfortably at one another until Tristan had conveyed his exacting pizza parameters. Lady Tracy and Mazowski took their turns, and then it was my turn. Here's the truth. I might make fun of Sir Tristan's ordering peccadillos. I might sneer at Mazowski's privacy naivete. I might turn up my nose at the pineapple and anchovies that Lady Tracy eats with such gusto. But the fact is, at least they all can eat, which is more than you can say for me. I'll just have a glass of water, I said, and endured 3 pairs of eyes looking at me with that mixture of pity and disgust I've come to know so well. My stomach growled at me, a sound I felt to my eyebrows, and I touched my midriff with one bony finger, a feeling like a dried-out drumhead, the skin stretched so tight and desiccated that it rustled. The waitress reached out with a chewed fingernail and tapped the scratched sign on the table that said, $10 minimum order per customer. I'd already noticed the sign. I slid out the $10 bill I'd placed under my fork and knife and passed it to her. It's cool, I said. She rolled her eyes with youthful eloquence and walked off, leaving our conspiracy to get back to business. You know, I said, for a gang of supercriminals, we're a pretty sorry bunch. Mazowski said, I'm going to pretend you didn't say that. Sir Tristan reached across the table and took my fork and held it up to the light, inspecting the tines and comparing it to his fork. Wordlessly, Lady Tracy handed him her fork too, and after some deliberation, he picked one and passed the other 2 back. Lady Tracy waited until he'd carefully squared the fork up on his napkin, keeping it evenly spaced with his knife and framed by a uniform border of white paper napkin. Then she darted out one hand, snatched the fork he'd so carefully chosen, and licked all its tines, front and back, and returned it to its spot. Sir Tristan glared at her, and then set the fork aside and picked up the remaining 3, and chose the one with the second most uniform tines, and once again set to squaring it up on his napkin. I saw the demonic glee light up Lady Tracy's eyes as she made ready to lick this one, too, and I put out my hand and caught her wrist. Don't, I said. Come on. My cracked skin rasped over Lady Tracy's smooth fingers, and she shuddered involuntarily. All right, children, Mazowski said. Enough. You're being arraigned tomorrow, and I need you all to be on your best behavior. The computer fraud and abuse charges are bad. Add the conspiracy count, and there's a serious chance you're going to end up in a cell until your trial. None of us want that, do we? Here, at last, was something that all the storied Knights of the Rainbow Table could agree upon. Once upon a time, in the Duchy of Berkeley, in the mythical kingdom of Bay Area, 3 brave knights did swear an oath to fight the forces of trolls, creeps, identity thieves, snoops, spooks, and the whole motley army of internet evildoers, lo, until they breathed their last breath. We didn't set out to become knights. We set out to test a cluster. A big, big cluster. Tristan got the idea after going to an art installation in which 1,000 antique PCs were networked across row on row of fake Metro wire shelving, each with a 3.5-inch floppy in its drive. The artist had done some clever mojo to span a single, redundant 1 GB file system across the whole cluster, which was used to store and retrieve a constantly updating loop of video shot with a single camera fixed into the ceiling, looking down on the exhibition. The artist had hired about a dozen kids on roller skates to ride around the racks, swapping out floppies as they went corrupt, the video on the big screen juddering every time this happened, and the file system recovered. So my idea was, why not build something, useful out of all the old computer junk around here, like a cluster or something? Tristan always had the least punctuation of anyone I knew, but he made up for this by inserting extra excited spittle between his words as he talked. Where would we keep it? I said. At the time, Tristan and I were sharing a 1-bedroom apartment near campus. I slept in the living room. When we had house guests, itinerant hackers mostly, they slept on an air mattress on the kitchen floor. What about the electric bill? Tracy said. She'd bossed a colo in Texas before she moved to Berkeley for college. She could quote the formula for calculating the net amperage per flop for the chillers from memory. What about administration? What about backhaul? Tristan shrugged and twirled up some of his mustache and stuck it in his mouth. Neither of us took any notice. He'd been doing that since freshman year, when we three had aced a joint project together that led to frequent hanging out and then roommatehood, and even a short-lived and mercifully painless romance between Tracy and me. I don't know, but what about a cluster? I mean a big one like a teraflop or bigger. I just thought it'd be cool. We admitted this was so, and went on to the next thing and the next, and several days went by before Tracy forwarded us both an email about the engineering faculty inheriting a semi-derelict brick factory near the Docklands as a bequest, on the condition that they not sell it on for 10 years. Tristan wrote most of the proposal. He was much better in print than he was in person. Tracy filled in the technical details, and I made the pitch to a prof we all liked, and he passed it up the food chain, and we ended up with 10,000 square feet. About 1/10 of the available square footage. We rigged up the water cooling ourselves, using seawater. Our faculty supervisor carefully ensured that he didn't know what we were doing. At first, there were a few other groups that applied for space in the brick shithouse, as the factory was instantly dubbed, thanks in part to the faint sewage smell that no amount of airing could get rid of. But no one really wanted to haul ass out to the shithouse, and soon we had the place all to ourselves. Our 10,000 square feet quickly grew to nearly the whole building. Row on row of PCs of every description salvaged from campus and nearby, wiped and in Linuxed, networked and left to wheeze for as long as it went on working. At any given time, about 15% of the cluster was non-functional, and we made good use of impressionable freshmen whom we sourced via Craigslist and threw at the problem machine, letting them keep whatever they could fix. This sounds zero-sum. If they took everything they fixed, wouldn't that mean that the dead machines would disappear? But fixing computers is like eating potato chips. Most people can't stop at just one. Each one is a perfect puzzle of vendor defects, material wear, capricious software ghouls, and emergent phenomena. The brain reward for restoring a genuinely threadbare PC to active duty was more psychotropic than anything for sale in People's Park. How much power did we have? Less than Google, more than all the radio astronomers in Europe combined. The number isn't important. To buy an hour's worth of all the CPU we assembled in today's cloud marketplace, you'd have to work for 2 hours at minimum wage. Our pizza waitress could blow us out of the water and still have enough left for rent, assuming she had a roommate. What do we do with all that power? At first, we just entered various big computation projects, throwing our farm at folding at home to do some handily parallelizable fast Fourier transforms in order to help fight AIDS and cancer and such. This is extremely altruistic work, but it's not very interesting from a research perspective. As interesting as it was to step into the frigid shithouse and be engulfed in the white noise jet wash of all the computers, we weren't learning anything about our cluster or its individual components. It was Tracy who decided to go after rainbow tables, these being something of a holy grail in the security field. It was Tracy who made us the Knights of the Rainbow Table and set our destiny in motion. But I forgive her. To understand rainbow tables, you need to understand hash functions. These are fundamental units of the cryptographic arts, and what they do is easy to grasp but requires a large amount of math or a large amount of faith. For the purpose of this account, I will go with faith. Take it on faith, if you will, that there is a way to convert one blob of text, the password, into another blob of text, the hash, such that it is mathematically certain that A, No amount of work will permit you to determine which password is responsible for creating which hash, and b. the same password always produces the same hash. If you will permit me this axiom, we can proceed without equations. Should you require equations to accept it, by all means, go look them up and then come back, you faithless wretch. Hashing functions are bipolar. You can never determine what password created them, but you can always redetermine the hash by feeding the same password back to it. They are mysterious and deterministic all at once. Imagine that you have created a good password. That is, one that does not appear in any dictionary that has been written, nor any dictionary that some clever person might create, say by taking all the words in the English language and substituting 1 for L and 3 for E and so forth. You visit a website and the server says, "Please give me a good password." You supply it. The server computes its hash and sticks that in a database and throws away your original password. The next time you visit the site, it will ask you for your password again. When you provide it, it runs it through the hashing function again discarding your original password, which it does not want to know, and compares the hash value with the stored hash on file. If they match, it knows that you have entered the password correctly, but it still doesn't know what the password is. A computer that only knows hashes and not passwords is a secure little beast, because even if the file of hashes leaks into the wide world, there's nothing a hacker can do with them. Even if she's captured the hash of your Wi-Fi password or your banking password or your e-reader password, it will do her no good. She can feed them to the Wi-Fi network or the bank or the e-reader without gain. In order to gain access, the hacker needs to know the password, not its hash. Thus, a computer can be secured with a minimum of secrecy, and that's good because secrets are very hard to keep. More on this anon. Think of hash passwords as the language of a dead culture with no progeny, a remarkable forgotten people who had an equivalent word for every word in every contemporary language, and even for our non-words and nonsense, and who left the key for translating our written phrases into theirs, but with no key by which we might go in the opposite direction. As these foreign words have no cognates with our own, there is no way to guess, merely by reading a word in hashese, what its contemporary equivalent might be. Enter the rainbow table. Imagine that you fed a dictionary into the hashing algorithm and made a table of the hashed equivalent of every word, and even non-words, such as words in combination, words with simple substitutions, slang, vernacular, foreign words, common phrases. Then, having captured a password's hash, you could compare it with every one of those hashed words. Look it up in your handy English hashese English dictionary, and out pops the secret password, no longer a secret. Now you have the password, which is all you need to successfully impersonate its owner to some naive computer, and mischief awaits. "What will we do with rainbow tables? I'm no crook," Tristan muttered from under his mustache as he idly punched the product ID off a potentially faulty network card into Google to see if anyone had written alternative drivers for it. Tracy started to answer, but just then one of our undergrad technicians came to the door of the shithouse's little office, reporting a fault in the cooling system. The cooling system had a lot of faults, because water cooling systems that use salt water are just stupid, given that salt water gradually eats everything that contains it, and what it doesn't eat it chokes with a sclerotic crust of dried salts. Not that we had any choice, because running traditional chillers would have clobbered the shithouse's annual budget in a matter of weeks, and without aggressive cooling, the place would spike at 60 degrees centigrade in about 5 minutes, and then it would be a race to see whether the assembled computers fused and died before they could start a fire that killed us all. Cooling took priority. Alright, I think that's enough. I'll read you the next week. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Cory Doctorow podcast, licensed under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial Share-alike US 3.0, or as Woody Guthrie put it in another context, this song is copyrighted in the US under seal of copyright 154085 for a period of 28 years, and anyone caught singing it without our permission will be a mighty good friend of ourn, because we don't give a darn. Publish it, write it, sing it, swing to it, yodel it, we wrote it, that's all we wanted to do. Many thanks to John Taylor Williams for mastering. That's Ryneck Studio, WRYNECK Studio @gmail.com. John Taylor Williams is a full-time self-employed audio engineer, producer, composer, and sound designer. In his free time, he makes beer, jewelry, odd musical instruments, and furniture. He likes to meditate, to read, and to cook. Talk to you next week.